For me, The Descent is a unique horror film and probably one of my favorites. Yes, it does follow the standard set of tropes that allow us to classify it as a horror film. An ensemble cast, an isolated location, monsters, the final girl, and an incredible amount of blood and gore. But that is not entirely the focus of the film. The film, in its true form, is a bleak story that explores tragedy within a horror framework, more evidently through the physical journey of the characters and through a metaphorical journey that is still open for discussion. In this video, I'll be discussing the themes of the film, how the film deconstructs the female cast, followed by Sarah's journey into madness. And by the end of the video, I'll be addressing both theatrical endings, the US and the UK version. However, I'll be using the UK version for the rest of this analysis. I want to start off this analysis with the car crash at the beginning of the film. The sequence is not only effective in jump-starting Sarah's journey, but also establishing the tone of the film. As the movie starts, we are introduced to the group of friends, Sarah, Beth, and Juno. Sarah's husband, Paul, and their daughter, Jessica, is waiting for them. Also, the day the crash takes place is on Jessica's birthday. I will further discuss its importance later in the video. In a moment, when packing up to go home, Paul and Juno share this brief look, implying that there is something going on between them. As the family drive home, Paul gets distracted by the thought of Juno.
Are you okay? You seem a bit distant.
I'm fine.
Apart from its effect to shock viewers visually, the graphic sequence is there to illustrate how the violent nature of the accident has affected Sarah and how it's going to affect Sarah throughout the story. It also prepares the viewers to the graphic nature of the film. On a technical level, the use of high contrast colors allows the film to establish the cold environment these characters live in that is met with the eruption of violence that they will encounter. By contrasting both scenes that show an affair taking place, followed by the death of a family, it establishes the conflict of the story and the trauma that follows. The film establishes the tragedy of the story quite clearly. It focuses on a simple narrative and few subplots that normally exist within a drama and places it into the context of a horror scenario. Underneath its gore-fest and horror elements, it's a movie that does not shy away from deconstructing these female characters and the tragedy of the story. As much as director Neil Marshall wanted a cast of women to lead the story and wanted to portray them as skilled, independent, and normal women, he doesn't hide character flaws including deception and selfishness, to name a few. Marshall does not shine a positive light on the majority of the characters, and Juno is the best example of this. After the affair Juno had with Paul and the events of the crash, Juno attempts to do things out of good intentions, hoping to seek forgiveness and rekindle her friendship with Sarah. However, this backfires, since Juno's overconfidence and ego gets in the way of it.
We're in the wrong fucking cave!
Holly was right. Warm Caverns was a tourist trap.
Don't try and pin this fucking shite on me!
This is not caving, this is an ego trip.
Her ego not only endangers the group as they follow her into the unmapped cave system, but every act of selfishness leads to their death. Holly is no different from this, and neither is Sarah by the end of the film. The moment that marks the inevitable death of these women is in this exchange around 40 minutes into the film.
Was this about me or you?
It's about us.
And this is just after the cave-in and just after Juno has lied to them. Juno still believes she is in the right, and the women continue to follow Juno as their leader throughout the rest of the film. As a result, there's a slow decay of humanity, modesty, and teamwork that leads these women towards their death.
It's Juno. The noise she's making, she'll bring every one of those things down on her head. As long as it's not on mine.
There is a sense of dread and foreshadowing when the women come across a dead animal with cuts in its neck before finding the cave around the 20-minute mark. This is a clear foreshadowing of Beth's death, as Juno accidentally wounds her and leaves her for dead due to guilt. Out of all the women in the group, Beth is shown to be the mother archetype. She doesn't have an ego, she cares for others, and is constantly making sure everyone is safe. Juno, on the other hand, is visually glorified and positioned in a male role, or the male hero archetype, whose typical role in a narrative is to save others, which adds a layer of irony to the scene. Marshall shoots the scene through Juno's perspective, which results in creating sympathy for both characters, especially for Juno, as her actions for leaving Beth and lying to others turns her into the tragic villain of the story. Juno's character works as a perfect contrast to Sarah, who isn't an egotistical or an overconfident person. As the film progresses, much of these negative traits start to spread through Sarah. When she starts killing the creatures by herself, she loses herself into the killing. However, it's when Sarah finds out about the affair through Juno's necklace.
Love each day. It's just something Paul used to say.
And the fact that she is forced to kill her best friend Beth, Sarah is reborn. She becomes coldly calculated, holds no resistance in killing the creatures, and releasing a lot of pain and suffering through violence. By the end of the film, she even manipulates Juno into helping her before leaving her to die as punishment for the affair and the death of her best friend. The film explores Sarah's trauma and journey towards insanity through both her physical descent into the cave and the symbolic descent into darkness. Throughout the film, Sarah is slowly losing her insanity and giving in to her trauma. Marshall was focused on making the story and the film flexible enough for audiences to enjoy it and to allow room for other possibilities. The main example of this is Sarah's dreams throughout the film. The death of her family took place on Jessica's birthday, and these dreams and visions not only highlight the impact of the deaths, but to also show the progression of Sarah's state of mind in the cave. It gets even worse when the cave itself starts to influence and affect her, such as Sarah hearing the voice of her daughter. The underground creatures are the extension of the internal conflict these characters are facing. More specifically, Juno and Sarah, as they are still dealing with their own internal conflict that is slowly consuming them figuratively and literally. For Juno, it's guilt, and she hides it through her overconfidence. And for Sarah, it is to get away from the pain and suffering. It's later revealed to be through the expression of violence that she can get away from that. This is linked to the extreme use of blood and gore in the film. In a way, this form of horror violence can be seen as an outburst of emotion, an outlet for fear, pain, guilt, or the emotional suffering the death of her family has caused her. Which does make sense for the multiple theories in online discussions, such as the entire film taking place in Sarah's mind after the accident, so each member acts as an individual personality type that is slowly being killed off by the parasites of trauma and death. Another popular theory suggests that Sarah went insane and killed her friends in the cave. In all three visions of the cake, there are 5 candles representing the 5 women. All candles are blown out at the beginning of the film, foreshadowing the death of these women, and by the end of the film, it comes full circle as Jessica blows out 6 candles, with the 6th candle representing Sarah. In the background, a swarm of creatures grow louder as they are about to kill her. This small detail can emphasize that Sarah, with nothing to lose, gives in to insanity for a glimpse of happiness and waits for her death. The Descent explores Sarah and Juno as fallen victims to a horrific scenario. The film uses a horror framework to elevate the tragic story of 2 women and how the death of their loved ones has affected them.
We all lost something in that crash.
Before I can finish this video, I need to talk about the two different endings of the film, the US and the UK version. There have been multiple discussions online and different articles on which ending is better and why. The film is very simple in its narrative structure, with mainly two clear subplots, the affair and Sarah's visions with her daughter. Personally, with either ending you choose, they both work thematically to tie up either subplot, but I prefer the UK ending. Not only does it include the US sequence, but it also concludes Sarah's visions with Jessica. With the US ending, after Sarah took the decision to leave Juno to die, the guilt and trauma of the events will stay with her. It is also thematically tied to this exchange early in the film.
Was this about me or you?
It's about us. Getting back to what we used to be. I wanted us to claim this place, name it. I thought maybe your name.
Or maybe yours.
That's the end of the affair subplot. The film adds closure to Sarah's suspicion about Paul cheating on her and the consequences Juno must face through Sarah's perspective. After Sarah injures Juno, she escapes. Here we have the second rebirth of Sarah, the sole survivor of the event. However, actions have consequences, and the death of another human on your hands will bring you guilt for a long time, visually shown through Juno's apparition. Juno is symbolically tied to Sarah through her husband and the event. With the UK ending, Sarah wakes up after seeing Juno's apparition. It also ends Sarah's journey towards madness throughout the film and her death. The story concludes with a bleak look towards trauma and grief. It adds closure to Sarah's visions of Jessica and her reunion with her for one last time. As the camera pans out, we hear the voices of the crawlers increase as they head towards Sarah. Overall, Neil Marshall created an interesting movie about tragedy within the framework of a horror scenario. The Descent does not only execute its tone, strong and flawed female characters, and create effective thematic links, but also create a tragic story of two friends and how the death of their loved ones has affected them on a physical and psychological level.